Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the podcast, the Nexus podcast. That is, I'm your co-host, Dave. I'm here with my co-host, King Jr., aka Burrito Voorhees. This is episode 26. What's up, my man?
What's up? What's up? Sorry for the wait in between episodes. We wanted to get this out a little sooner, but yeah, just glad to get it done or started. And I'm not the best at intros, I guess, on the spot. So I'll let you take it back, Dave.
That's right. So today we have one of the most influential Kitana players in the NRS community of all time. I remember one of his milestones specifically. Once King Jr. reminded me of, because I'm getting old, which was at final round 20, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017. He placed top eight. Um, and then I remember in top eight for Mortal Kombat X, and then before that, I remember watching the Combat Cup, which was like an online, um, consistent online tournaments. He was active, I believe, from 2016 to late 2017, also in Mortal Kombat X, and I know he also played some Mortal Kombat 9 for sure. Um, so let's welcome StarCharger to the Nexus podcast. How have you been, my friend?
Hey, been great, been great. Thank you guys for having me on, and yeah, it's always great to go ahead and catch up with some old friends. Yeah, especially at times like this where keeping everybody keeping everybody close is at a premium.
Hopefully, I didn't mess up any numbers. If I did, I'm sorry. As far as
No, that was actually good. That
as
was
far
actually very good.
yeah, I can see the chat. I'm typing down like episode numbers, etc. So I don't mess stuff up. But let me ask you. We kind of like talked about. Well, you didn't talk. I was going to ask you even before we started recording. Are you playing anything in terms of fighting games? If not fighting, are you playing anything in general in terms of gaming?
Honestly, right now I am, as far as just gaming in general. I am really just enjoying. I'm really just enjoying a lot of time, just being a filthy casual right at this point. I am really just, as far as competing, I am about as retired right now as I can think of because honestly, um, I've basically seen that my reactions aren't quite what they once were. And in spite of course, me loving seeing Mortal Kombat X continuing to get the shine that it deserves all these years later, just watching all the young blood and watching everybody just take the baton and just go with it now over the last couple of years, that's been fun. And especially seeing combo breaker come and go and see the great numbers at it had 90 entrants, 89 entrants over there at combo breaker, which is beautiful. And that's awesome to see in here in year 12, interestingly enough, as far as the game is concerned. So that's awesome to see. And but as far as what I'm playing and what I'm doing right now as far as gaming goes, it just, yeah, for me it just feels good to be a filthy casual for the time being.
I don't want to be, I guess, Captain Obvious in terms of asking questions, but it seems like Mortal Kombat X is kind of like the the most, the dearest NRS game to your heart. Is that correct?
I think it's fair to absolutely say that. I mean, MK9, all of us love MK9. Of course, that was the game that it really kicked everything off in terms of me going competitive back in the time. And then, of course, growing up, I always grew up going to the arcades and seeing Mortal Kombat and playing everything from Mortal Kombat 1, Mortal Kombat 2, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, etc. When I was younger, just as a kid, just playing around and fooling around. But MK9 is where it got serious, and MKX is where it really hit its pinnacle for me. And yeah, that's another big reason why that game is just always going to be at the pinnacle for me personally, especially after NRS did what they did with the last update of the game. I mean, that was what solidified it in stone for me. And yeah, yeah, no, even with everything that's come since then, nothing's been able to top that for me.
We'll talk about the last update for Mortal Kombat X because I have some stuff to say. I think so does King Jr. We want your opinion on. But can you talk about, and I honestly kind of forget, in fact, King Jr. and I, like, we talked about he was playing Mortal Kombat X, whatever. He's trying to get some content on his channel, and I was like walking, whatever we were talking. And honestly, I kind of forget since I've been around for so long. He was talking, Displacer Rate. And I'm like, bro, I don't remember anything about Displacer Rate. Like, it's been so long, especially because spoiler alert, I wasn't too fond of the last version of MKX. But can you talk about Kitana, which variation you used, and what she played like when you had your success and thereafter?
Yeah, of course, just remembering Mortal Kombat X just from the beginning, of course, just in general to answer the question, the first part of the question when it came to variation, Assassin was my variation. And the moment Katana's trailer dropped, with her and that joint trailer with Kung Lao, it was the time where we got to see what she was capable of, and knowing full well what she was in MK9 and what I was hoping she would be in MKX, in the sense of how they would really take that and move to the next level with her and her abilities as a character. I When I saw her pull off the running attack on Kano in that trailer, that was the moment I thought, "Whoa! What variation allows her to do this?" And then I saw full well the capabilities that came later on. And I mean, that trailer is still one of the most hyped trailers in Mortal Kombat and in NRS history. If you go back and watch it, I mean, it's still one of the greatest things ever. And then, of course, the combat cast that came on, where they explained Katana and her kit and whatnot. When they showed that move and showed Assassin all together, that was when I realized that variation was going to be it for me. And that was when I was realizing that, I thought they did my girl justice. And then, of course, the game dropped in earnest with the original version of Katana and MKX, and I saw things like Ford 1 being negative 36 on block. I saw things to the tune of a fan toss on block up close was full combo punishable. She whiffed anything, she was dead meat, which honestly you would think that's the case for every character, but that's not, especially so for Katana. And then, essentially her kit was so bad that honestly I was wondering how long I was going to wind up playing the game and surviving what she had, because it was painstakingly obvious when the game dropped that she was going to require a lot of dedication and a lot of patience and a lot of insanity to stick with in order to get anything out of her. And as Flux put it back in that time, because he was coming from Marvel and playing the game at the time, he said, "Oh yeah, playing her is a chore." And that I couldn't have put it any better. And then because you coming in from Mortal Kombat 9, where she, in spite of her weaknesses, her kit essentially made her one of the top 10 characters in the game, on the lower end of the top 10, but well enough to where you could sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I can absolutely make this work," because of course she's my favorite character of all time. And you do everything you can to make that character work, especially if they gel with your playstyle, which of course in MK9 she did, and in MKX I was dead set on making her do, whether it was Royal Storm, Assassin, although Assassin became my main squeeze. And then Mournful, I absolutely hated the fact that they just stuffed Jade's aesthetic inside of her kit, because she's her character all on her own. There was no reason for her to have another character's influence with her kit. So that was one thing that did rub me raw, and it still rubs me raw to this day, because that carried on in the MK11 with the Psy being placed with her, even though it didn't need to be in the end. But that's another story. But when the update, it basically took laundry list of updates after updates after updates after the original release of the game for her to become serviceable, but not so much so to where it was enough to really get her needle moving in the right direction, which is why when I got top 8 at Northwest Majors in 2016, and then followed that up by getting top 17 at Evo, when I did, with the kit that she had at that time, it felt good, and it's felt good, even generating some upsets at that time, even though I was so tantalizingly close to top 8 with that version of the character being as far and away as she did. I mean, to put it in perspective, of course, one of her matchups at that time was she had a couple of 9-1, 8-2, borderline 9-1 matchups at that time, one of which was against Melina, piercing Melina. And I was fortunate to win my match against Rewind, who was a debutante at Evo at that time in 2016, and I was fortunate enough to win that match somehow in order to make things work. And so, but after I did that, and after I got top 8 at Absolute Battle in 2016, I thought, okay, maybe I've done enough to where I think this is where I can retire from the game and focus on something else altogether. And then NRS pulls a blinder out of nowhere while we're at Mid South Championships. I was sharing. I was with Too Easy. He and I were sparring, and he and I were at Mid South Championships together as sparring partners, and we were doing what we could to go ahead and place in the tournament. And then he and I saw the news drop on social media at the same time that weekend. It was September in 2016 that the NRS dev team was dropping a final update for MKX that was going to rebalance the whole game. And that was like, whoa, you gotta be kidding me. This is a whole new lease on life. And remember, this is at a time when Alien was actually running roughshod in the game. Tanya had run roughshod at one point. We all remember it. Of course, that was the EVO finals where Tekken Master and Sonic Fox had that epic clash where in the end Sonic had to go to Alien in order to win the whole thing, and everybody was groaning in disgust that Alien was gonna have a part to play in all of that. But at the same time, this was a time when we were thinking, okay, so Alien's going to come down a peg or two. We're going to see a whole different lease of life with what they were going to do. I didn't expect them to go ahead and take out, armored launchers to the degree that they did, although it made sense what they did, and I still support that being the case, albeit there were some caveats here and there. But with what they did to Kitana, I remember the laundry list of changes that I wanted to go into her character. But, the NRS essentially gave her a list of changes whilst she deserved them. And I was happy she got them, and I was happy she got a lot of the treatment she got, like the forward 2 change, the faster overhead, the better a lot of items in her kit just wound up going for the better fan toss damage, the faster down 3 that wound up changing a lot of her gameplay up close. I mean, it really gave a whole new lease on life. And then, but at the same time, they were changes that at the time I didn't agree with, and even to this day I still don't think they were the changes that she needed. They were the changes she deserved, but not the ones she needed. But at the end of the day, they gave her a whole new lease on life. And especially the DP change. To this day, I still don't agree with that. It was a one that she needed, one that she did, one that she deserved, but not one that she needed. But
are you referring to, was it quarter circle forward 2? Was that the move, or am I?
Yeah, quarter circle back 2.
Oh, quarter circle back. Okay. And the overhead, it's back 2. Was it back 2 or was it back 1? I don't remember.
Back 2. It's back 2. Yeah.
Do you know how? I think at the end, was it 18 frames or
they made it 18 frames.
Do you know what it was before that?
Before that, it was 25.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
I forget that stuff. I know. I was watching Royal Storm. That's what it's? I think Royal Storm Kitana, and I think Dragon was using her, and the way he was playing, I was like, you know what? I don't play this game anymore. But if I did, this looks something like I could find myself spamming on people. So it was interesting. So obviously back 2 change, that was huge, right? Like to go from an over.
It was mega.
Yeah, to go. Well, that's one of the things, and I hope we get to talk about this later. Is like in Mortal Kombat 1 that she is missing, because Mortal Kombat 1 is kind of like a lesser MKX. But you still need mix-ups. Yeah, you still need mix-ups, and what they did to Kitana, like it's really hard to break people down in that game with her.
Yes.
So I don't know. I like that change. I think if you're gonna make a game offensive, you should, to some extent, give everybody some kind of offense. And I like that change. The DP one, I mean, let's get right into it. I personally think armor in that game was a necessary evil. If you're gonna make backdash require, like waste resources, when you're gonna make offense that oppressive, when you're gonna make jumping that oppressive. What I didn't like, and obviously I'm not I don't expect you to cry for me. Because I use tremor in that game, but it's like I kind of like yeah, I like my up punch. Not that was used in the neutral, right? It was the low shatter, obviously, but I like my up punch for
Yes.
anti-air. Like it was very easy to anti-air. Once they kind of removed that, I was just kind of like scrabbling sometimes. Again, not asking people to cry, for tremor, but it's just like, and it's almost like the removal of certain armor attacks didn't matter anyway, because some of the characters kept theirs anyway, while others kind of lost theirs. And then you had Liu Kang with 2 hits of armor. Like I think it was just, to me, it was a disaster. Like certain characters like kind of like get the better end of the stick, while others got the shorter one. And I really never understood that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. How do you feel?
I mean, honestly, and before I get into my answer, and that's fair, and I just want to make it very clear that in spite of everybody, and this could probably just be me being a katana player, an assassin katana player, where I've had many a great battle with Tremor, whether it be you and I used to play back in the day for a while, whether it was Denzel, whether it was Unbearable Skill, whether it was Killer Zenok, whether it was, of course, your brother Burrito, Forever King, whether it was Ray Lakers, who's of course seen a run of form that has been absolutely astonishing, especially here late in MKX's life, which I'm happy to see. He's one of those young talents that I'm very happy to see. I've never had a problem with Tremor being strong. And when in Crystalline Tremor, I never had a problem with him being intimidating, because honestly, that was what everyone was waiting on when we all thought Tremor was on his way, was going to be reborn. And he was reborn in a way that was honestly exactly what you would think a bruising character should be. And that's exactly what he was. He just simply lived up to every ounce of the hype. And, honestly, another thing about Tremor that people didn't really take advantage of, or didn't bother to lab, was the fact that in the neutral, he really doesn't have a very reliable mid. Doesn't really have a forward advancing mid, and that's something that if you understand how to play the game from a grounded, fast-paced neutral standpoint, or whatever the case may be, like Katana can, that you can take advantage of that. Yeah, and that's something that a lot of folks can really use to try and keep a lot of what Tremor had at bay. But at the same time, that's the beautiful thing about Mortal Kombat X, is the fact that everybody has their dirt, and if you can work on maximizing what each and every single character has in their kit, honestly, there's no real excuse why any character in that game can't really make hay, to the degree of really not being in a position to really think too badly about somebody else's keys to victory, as they can easily point out some of the crazy things that you have with your character and their keys to victory that you may or may not be taking advantage of. But going into the whole armor launcher, basically how everything was changed up in the game. So just speaking from a katana player standpoint, her armor was changed such that the DP eventually became a catalyst behind how she started a lot of her offense, to the degree of anti-airing people if you so chose to do it, to essentially starting block pressure, block string cancel pressure, which cost a bar to do. And then whenever you just decided to wake up and just use it as a full-fledged wake up option, you used it as a means of actually creating a way of getting an armored launcher combo, which cost 2 bars for 31 or to 33%. But at the same time, and by the same measure, it was still something that you could actually use as a means of really making somebody think twice about pressuring you. And that was one thing about Katana that she especially took advantage of after the final patch, was that she had an arsenal of wake-up attacks that not only could do mountain loads of damage on you at the cost of resources, mind you, and put you in a position where you're then caught up in a set play situation where she could really start to make things snowball on you a little bit. But she could also essentially make you realize, well, okay, she's got this arsenal of weapons, maybe I should really alter my approach. And that's where rule number 3, because I always told people the 3 keys to katana, the 3 rules to katana, historically speaking, but especially so in MKX, were: rule number 1, don't ever jump regardless of your reason, it's not worth it. Rule number 2, read low first, which means always read whenever you're on the defensive against her, especially with that buffed up overhead. Even with the buff overhead, read low first, because her back three eventually became a weapon she could use as a low, where if she caught you standing, all it took was a low in a dream. We always say Cyrax, a net in a dream, where we all know how that originated. But when it came to Katana, especially in MKX, if she caught you blocking high with that back three or with back 1-4 or anything of that sort, next thing you know, you're going for a ride that you're not going to enjoy. Yeah, that's why I said read low first for rule number 2, and rule number 3 was always be patient and respectful, and that goes beyond just trying to pressure her, just waiting for yeah, that goes beyond just waiting for a mistake that you could take advantage of when it comes to whiffing and when it comes to baiting out armor or anything like that. It also means, try and make her use resources that she doesn't want to use, because of course when she ever found herself the royal bank account, i.e. her meter, empty, because I always said the royal bank account never goes empty. But if Katana mismanages her meter and finds herself with no resources, next thing you know, you're in the best position imaginable, because your patience and your respect actually won you an opportunity to win the fight right then and there. A lot of the best players, knew how to really take advantage of that, especially to the point to where, you put her in positions where she would have to, use resources that, idealistically speaking, she wouldn't want to use. So, but as far as armor, and that's where armor is important. Like you said, Dave, it's a necessary evil in a game like Mortal Kombat X. And if you didn't have it, if you didn't have the resources to use it, well, then that really altered the matchup in ways that honestly you were going to regret if you found yourself on the defensive, because as Mortal Kombat is often famous for saying, blocking will get you nowhere. And in Mortal Kombat X, if you're caught well on the defensive for extended periods of time, well, you're going to see that health bar of yours in some bad shape faster than you can spell bad shape. So it makes sense to go ahead and stockpile that, and it makes sense to go ahead and utilize it when necessary. Now, I understand where, some folks, armored launchers, they were thinking, oh, well, if you take that away, well, that's going to make a lot of how I want to do things a lot different. But to my standpoint, also, if you're depending on armor in order to launch people away, that basically highlights a fault in your approach to the game, to the degree where you're essentially saying that, without this armored launcher, I'm nothing. Without this armored launcher, my character's nothing. Whereas, that armor may have been reallocated to a move within your arsenal that might not grant you a full combo on contact, but by the same stretch of the imagination, it's still a get off me move that you can use to essentially let that opponent know you're not just going to push me around and keep me bogged down like this. And so that was one beautiful thing about the armor system in MKX. If you were smart with your meter, with meter management, that's one thing that made MK9 and MKX so awesome, was the meter management. That, you could either use it for that one giant magic bullet, the X-ray. You could either use it to break out of a combo if you're caught into something that full well can turn the tide against you, with the breaker system with 2 bars, or you could save it for 3 bars of meter, where you can give yourself either armored reversals, armored wake up attacks, or armor to enhance whatever kind of sequence that you're doing, or even for that matter, just as a fear factor to let your opponent know, hey, I've got this resource, so back off. You can't really just push me around. But the thing about it also, as far as where I see it from a lot of people's standpoint, but at the same time, it forced people, because remember, Mortal Kombat X has always been fast. It's always been fast and furious. And then, of course, utilizing the stamina gauge also, that's another resource to do things like run cancels, the run system, and basically controls your movement altogether, backdashing, etc. I mean, there's just a lot of management that goes into how you can really maximize on how you play in MKX, and that was another reason why those aspects of the game, as subtle as they were, made the game so appealing to play. Was that, okay, if you have the capability of run canceling, you can use that resource, but if you want to go ahead and go another route to really impose your will on somebody, there's the meter resource to go ahead and utilize your armor and how you can make that work. But in terms of armored, just armored launchers being a lifeblood of that, people have adapted. people have adapted and shown that once you took that away and made folks realize that they had other tools at their disposal, all of a sudden they're using tools that they didn't even realize were there in order to turn the tide in their favor. And now that's what you see in current day MKX play, and that's one thing that's made the development of the game over time after that final patch so great to witness that a lot of the ways that a lot of folks could really turn off their brains before, that doesn't apply now. I mean, it's a completely different mindset now compared to where things were back then, and that's another reason why the game has had the long life that it's had. And unfortunately, the ways that things were deviated from in the future games like MK11, MK1, it's not that same kind of meta, and it doesn't have that same kind of appeal. But and then, of course, as you mentioned,
Can I just say, I hate to interrupt the guest. Just you
go
kind
ahead,
of
go ahead,
we kind of want to comment on because
go ahead.
you have made some great points. Most I agree with, some I disagree with. And before we like jump from like MKX to MK11, I mean, we'll trust me, we're gonna ask you all about that. We're just trying to like just kind of like
Absolutely.
handle like one topic at a time, and also let like um, King Junior comment as well. I'm I think it's I know speaking of King Junior, um, I know he's gonna roll his eyes when I say this, but I do think it's a matter of preferences. Like, I could
Yes.
tell like you like the game, and I at some point I enjoyed it. Again, I think armor launching the way I see it as this, and then King Junior can also comment on it. We'll let you respond. When a game is like 80% offense or 20% defense, I have a problem with that because uh, as a mostly kind of like you have played me like as a mostly like defensive type zoning player, I'm obviously at a disadvantage playing a game like that. I would argue, and I know people think I'm strange, but like armor was the defense in the game. Obviously armor was your zoning in the game, whether it launched or not. Obviously when it launched it was even better because armor was your anti-air. Armor was your, hey, stop running at me, you fool, like respect what I have in the neutral, right? I would argue that's almost a necessity when you have crazy, insane offense in the game. Like, I don't know, at one point, just to pull something out of my butt, I remember, what was the first grand finals combo breaker was Dizzy against Sonic Fox, right? And Dizzy was essentially like spamming but essentially what was a block infinite, right? So when you have insane stuff like that, then hell yeah, I expect it to be a better percentage between offense and defense. That's all I'm saying. And to me, I still stand by the fact I think the game got boring as with the last patch. I think they nerfed a lot of stuff that shouldn't been nerfed. I'm happy like for the Kitana buffs. I'm glad that happened because I think that's a character like I agree with you. You suffered. You deserve those buffs. But let's have King Junior. Like I know you kind of have a maybe similar, a slightly different perspective than I do. What do you think?
Yeah, there was a lot
I know
of
I know we touched upon a lot. So, but yeah, go
no,
ahead.
no, no. I do remember the days that Katana was at a low point, like on release, and then obviously like over time she got her buffs, which were deserved and all that stuff. But I do think some of the buffs were overkill in the hot fix. Like, I like I said, I think some of the armored
Yes.
launchers were like not done fairly. Like some characters lost like too much in the armor department, while some characters kept theirs. Maybe it just was a little more expensive. And Katana's is one of the few characters, along with like Shinnok and technically Liu Kang in some way with flying kick. Like she can meter burn her launcher on block and on hit, so she had a confirmable armored launcher, which she was super spoiled in that regard. And Goro too. So like, she had one of the best kinds of armored launchers, and I do think the hot fix, you could see what they were trying to do, but it just wasn't executed the best. I think they should have just made armored launchers 2 bars, regardless of like they shouldn't have even changed the properties. In my opinion, they should have left them as is and just made them all cost 2 bars. And I think it would have made the armor changes a lot more fair, and like keep the lesser rewarding armor moves like 1 bar. Like Liu Kang's Dragon Punch or something, for example. But yeah, the final hotfix nerfed like my favorite characters, a lot of them, especially like the run cancel characters. But then you have characters like Tremor and Predator that have the stationary cancels, so they're spoiled in that regard. They don't have to run for their cancels,
Yeah.
so they can still get 2 repetitions, unlike the runners. So there was actually a difference with those kind of characters. They nerfed like OTG properties, like making them scale really bad. So poor Goro, poor Necromancer Shinnok, and the other weird variations I like using. So yeah, there was just even Ferritor got hit with the run cancel nerfs and like some other nerfs from the online beta changes, and it's just like damn. Yeah, lots of characters got nerfed from my roster, and I'm
Yeah, and
someone that
also
played like every character because I was middle school time me, so I had a lot of time on my hands and I enjoyed the brutalities. And Assassin was also my favorite variation for Katana. What were you about to say, Dave?
I like the. I was about to say like the run cancel and the skill that it required. I thought it was one of the like higher aspects of skill demonstration in that game. So like if you're Johnny Cage, yes, we all know he was broken at one point, but like why would you nerf that about him? Because that's like the one thing that made him, like if you could do that, that kind of stood out, made you stand out as a player because you put in the work with those run cancels. Why would you nerf that above everything, right? So, and you said it perfectly. Like some characters got like like the high end of the stick. Others got shorter just because they didn't nerf the armor properly, or maybe they didn't nerf it at all, or they got with the 2 bar thing that you mentioned. So I personally, the reason I dislike the Mortal Kombat X, I actually at one point liked the game a lot, and it was probably my favorite. But I think to me they kind of ruined it with the last version. Not necessarily in every aspect, because again I like the katana boss. I think they were justified, especially like if you're like starters trying to fight 8-2 matchups, 7-3 matchups. Like it's just like, oh my god, when is gonna my turn to to at least fight even or winning matchups. So I'm okay with that, but I just feel like they mismanaged a lot of what made MKX fun in its vast majority of its lifespan.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also the hot fix too. Like before the hot fix, the pre hot fix, which is still accessible if you have the disc of MKX and just don't allow it to update via Wi-Fi. Me and M2 Dave and my brother will reminisce on the old days of MKX pre hot fix, and we'll play that patch because that was our favorite patch for the game. And that patch of the game was like a top 2 NRS game for me. So after the hot fix, it fell down to like out of the 6 NRS games, we're not including MK vs DC. It's like a bottom 2 NRS game for me. After MK11 being like the lowest one for me. So like that, it was a huge difference in my NRS game tier list from pre hotfix to post hotfix. So yeah, it went from top 2 to bottom 2 in my opinion after that hotfix. Sadly.
No, I can understand y'all's perspectives, and I can understand why when some of those hits came in, yeah, it did some damage. And as far as now, as far as what I stated earlier on katanas, I'm just go there. I do, and this harkens back to what I said when I said that they a lot of the buffs she got were buffs she were buffs she deserved, but not what she needed. In the sense of hearing, and I'm gonna try and go down from the top down as much as I can. I did agree that she got over buffed to a degree, because remember, one of the buffs that they gave her was her armored throat slice, or rather her enhanced throat slice being safe on block and armored. It was armored pre-patch as well, but with the buffs that she got, they made it armored and they made it as safe on block as it is now post hotfix. The hotfix, they took the armor away, and I said, yeah, that was for the best, because people were just throwing armored throat slices around like crazy because there was literally no way to punish that darn thing on block. And honestly, I thought that was dumb. I thought, nah, you guys didn't even need to touch throat slice at all. I mean, they gave her forward to Looney Tunes range, which I wanted it to be a few frames faster. It's 19 frames. I wanted it to be about 16 or possibly even 17 frames, and they kept it at 19, but they just maximized even more so on its range than what it already was. And I was sniping people from half the screen away. And I was like, this isn't quite the buff I would have given her, but hey, at least you buffed it. Yeah, so that was one of those things, another one of those changes where I was like, okay, well, it's not what I would have given her, but I'm glad you gave her something. But And then of course the throat slice, yeah, that was overbuff. And now the DP. Now, like I said earlier, I never agreed with the DP change because for me, that was the thing that drove me away from competitive Street Fighter. Because during the Street Fighter 4 days, where one of the core mechanics of that game was the focus attack dash cancel system, the FADC system, and it allowed you to burn a couple of bars in order to cancel a move, whether it was a normal, a special, anything of those. You couldn't do that for ultra moves or for super moves for obvious reasons. But when it came to focusing your meter into canceling out of a move like a Shoryuken, for example, and using that either on block or on hit. That was one thing that made the Shotos as hated as they were in Street Fighter 4, and that was another reason why, especially the guys characters like Akuma, where he could just do stuff like that and just get all kinds of craziness out of that kind of a system, which of course he did. But it goes beyond that, you know.
Yeah,
It goes,
if you remember the initial, the vanilla version, Sagat did
oh,
like
absolutely,
Tiger
God,
Uppercut, Tiger Uppercut forward roundhouse, and into Ultra, I did like
yep,
65%, like most of the
deleted your health bar.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah.
And he got a full setup after that too with the tiger shot, no matter where he was on the screen. And yeah, you were just left SOL in ways that honestly should never have existed, because it went beyond just being able to be used on hit, which obviously on hit it leads to some nice things. But if you did it on block, it was just an out. It was just one of those ways where those characters that were meter building machines could just use those kinds of invincible 3-frame startup, auto reversal, priority over everything moves in order to get somebody on the defense. You could even use it when somebody was waking up, like Seth could. Like if you ever see Punko or Daigo or anybody just walk up to somebody as they're getting up off the ground, just do a DP right in their face, and then just FADC immediately afterward, whether it's hit confirm, whether it's on block. I mean, there's nothing you can do, especially if your character that doesn't have a DP or anything like that. I hated that system. I hated that way of allowing somebody with a move that had absolute priority to be canceled like that and to be abused like that, where it was just something that was just the bane of a lot of characters' existence. And the thing about it was that was what drove me away from Street Fighter. And the beautiful thing about Katana's DP, because they got buffed, I believe it was 3 times throughout the course of MKX's life, where first time by they gave it more damage, second time by they gave it they actually gave it even more damage on top of that. And then the third time by, of course, which is the final patch, was just when they actually decided to give it the cancel ability. And now before all that, but in order to cancel it, all you needed was 1 bar, and then the hot fix came around, I believe, and then it wound up being 2 bars. You know, a bar in order to cancel it, and then a bar in order to follow through with the 2-in-1 cancel with the float, because the float, which has now become my favorite all-time katana move after MKX. It's something that I pray stays a staple in her game no matter what. The float allowing her to do as many things as it did from MKX onward it cannot be understated, and it being 2-in-1 cancel from that DP was always I mean, I thought, as neat as it may have looked on paper, it was one thing that I never agreed with, because that's exactly what I got away from Street Fighter for, because I hated the idea of a move. And remember, her DP has 2 hits on contact, which means if somebody's waking up with armor or something like that, and I just DP in their face, even with a standard DP, because it's 2 hits on contact, it could shred their armor and either trade or beat them outright. So it allowed me to essentially be put in a position where I'm doing the very thing to other people that I hated having done to me in Street Fighter 4, because I thought it was unnatural for a DP to be used in that manner.
Yeah, that was one of the things that made the matchup difficult for Tremor, right? Because even if Tremor did armor, right, you can do your armor, and then
Oh yeah,
and even when he was crystalline. But let me ask you
Crystalline.
this. Yeah, crystalline. Let me ask you this. Um, So what do you think? I think we can all agree, like, a DP doing 65 to 70% is not good, obviously for the game.
Yes,
But,
obviously.
yeah, but I think I would also argue that the last version of MKS is not good for the game, at least for me preference wise, because the problem is certain offense. For example, like Tremor's Rolling Stone, right? That was not really a good move pre-patch because people would just armor, right? Kind of see it on reaction if they could. But then actually that move became like really solid in pressure. Because again, like who gives a damn about getting hit by most armor? It doesn't do anything. So I want to ask you, like, what do you think is the balance? Like, if you have an offensive game, where do you kind of draw the line? Where would you draw the line?
Honestly, now for me, I still think that the final direction they went with the game overall did a lot more good than it did harm, simply because of the fact that a lot of the ways that a lot of that meter or that armored launchers and everything could be abused to a degree, it got toned down to where it no longer became the ultimate meta. But by the same stretch of the imagination, I do agree that in some cases, for some characters, it wound up really hurting them to an extent that and it just goes beyond just the armored launchers. It also goes over to the we talked about it earlier, the stamina gauge. It also goes to how that was affected with the changes that definitely impacted a lot of people's game plans in too much of a dire sense. And then of course, combining those changes overall, whether it be metered launches, and then of course the energy gauge to a certain extent, I think that a happier medium could have been found for some characters, like you mentioned, A-list Johnny, who took a lot of skill in order to master and manipulate to the degree of using him at a high level. Although folks have adapted now and have gotten to a point where if you wanted to use A-list Johnny, you could absolutely run train with him if you wanted to. But in the sense of, just like characters like, for example, Lackey Ferrator. I know you love that variation of that character, Burrito, and I really felt for Lackey fans when I saw what that character became after the final patch and after the final update was put in place. I felt bad right there. I was like, oh no, that hurts that character way too much. And then I also thought, to a certain extent, I mean, Devore is still as strong as ever, but I thought that the run cancel changes would affect Devore to a degree, along with all other run cancel characters. Although Ninja Killer showed everybody that as far as Liu Kang was concerned, it didn't really matter because Liu Kang wound up being the best character in the game if you put the time in, put the execution in with him to become untouchable, and that's essentially what wound up happening as he wound up showcasing over the years after the final update was done. Because that final update was it was one hell of a launching point for what he would become, and we were all happy to have been able to witness that. But just with the game overall, I mean, some happier mediums could have been found to certain degrees. Um, they a little bit more could have been done, but by the same stretch, when you look at the fact that Mortal Kombat X still has a very happy quality of life with how people adapted to what has been done. Now, just going back to Katana before I go into that, just going back, yeah, because like I said, just going on to her changes, one thing I would have done to balance or take away the lunacy of a DP having the utility that hers had, they wanted to make her more offensive and they wanted to give her more identity with what she had. They could have made her Assassin's Rush, the move that I mentioned earlier. They could have easily made that move run cancelable, and I would have had a degree of execution that I would have looked forward to learning, as opposed to actually having my DP being some sort of built-in auto pressure or whatever the case may be. Or they could have also made the Fan NATO and Royal Storm able to cancel out all other projectiles as it's on its way. Yeah, so that move would be a lot more serviceable. There were a lot of different ways they could have gone along with buffing Katana, but they did what they did, and I had to adapt to it. And that was another thing that they did, all told, with the way that they changed things up. They made people have to adapt to the way the new meta came around and actually altered the landscape all told. And over the years, people have done just that to the point to where when you look around at a retro tournament for NRS, the healthiest game with the healthiest amount of entrants, and the game that's been able to keep things going even at times when things were rough for the new releases. And then like it was for Injustice 2, MK11, MK1, MKX has always been there simply because of the fact that folks understand that, you know, with that final update, you put in the work with your character or put in the work with whatever variations you want to use, and you can absolutely run train at your own will against any kind of an opponent where you have to realize where you get out of it what you put into it. And that's one thing that's kind of lacking with the newest titles. The game might be brutal, yes. MKX with the final update, even before the final update, that I thought before the final update wasn't so fun, not only because my character wasn't as good to keep up with the Joneses, but also because of the fact that in a lot of ways, a lot of the pressure and a lot of the things that were being done, in spite of me being an offensive oriented player myself, were very much overdone to some degrees, where a lot of characters and a lot of matchups and a lot of what was going on was more lopsided than what people would like to admit. And
Yeah,
so,
I wanted to ask, like,
sure.
obviously, Katana's been through many changes, like most other characters in NRS games, because they don't really do too much consistency in terms of like animations and designs and like the lack of legacy in our games. So like,
Right.
I wanted to ask like, if you know, if another Mortal Kombat game is coming out, how would you want her to play? Like, would you want her to be more like the MK9, like zony style, and not so much on the 50/50s, or like, would you want her to be like closer to a hybrid or zoner slash like rushdown character like an MKX or any other design that I didn't list that NRS hasn't done for her really? Like, what would be your ideal katana design, assuming they don't go with legacy, which they probably won't. But uh, yeah, that's because me, I do think they should go with legacy, but I'm just curious. Like, I'm assuming this is your favorite version of katana too, right? MKX katana.
That is correct.
Yeah, like what would you want her to design to be in a future MK title if that's what's next for us?
Well, it would all depend on how the game plays. If the game plays at a faster pace, well, and here's another thing about Katana also. Katana's strength has never really been her rushdown or her zoning or anything like that. It's always been her versatility in being able to control the game in essentially all phases to the point to where, you know, if she's able to apply the three rules that I mentioned earlier on the screen, then she has the ability to switch in and out of whichever playstyle she that best suits her interests or the katana player's interests with regards to how that match is going to play. But at the same time, like I said, that also depends on how the game is played. So in terms of MK9, she was she had solid normals and she had solid capability from mid screen and from mid range. Her normals weren't exactly the greatest thing up close because she was very limited, although she did have ways to fight up close if you got the opening to apply them. But at the same time, in terms of her archetype with how armor became meta, very much meta in Mortal Kombat 9. And this is another thing that I think kind of influenced what they did with the final update of Mortal Kombat X, where if you didn't have armor or Kung Lao level mobility in MK9 in the later stages of that game, even now, well, then essentially your character was not going to be able to do too much damage in terms of being able to keep up with the top tiers in that game in order to make a really good amount of hay. And the thing about that is that MK9 had some very nuanced movement. It had very one of a kind flow to it. And that was one thing that made that game very endearing and makes it very sad to this day, especially to my heart, that it never got a final patch. And so, if a game a next MK game was to be made with a system like that, I would pray that they would augment what you'd be able to do in terms of from an armored reversal standpoint or from a reversal capability standpoint, which in subsequent Mortal Kombat titles, it looks like they've gotten the message on that. She'll never be in that kind of a vulnerable position again. But by the same stretch, in terms of what she's able to do offensively, because damage has never been a problem for her, as we already know. Yeah, and just about most Mortal Kombat games, with the exception of MK11, basically she touches you, you're in trouble, and so that's never been an issue. And then of course, her versatility has always been one of her greatest assets. Her movement has always been her greatest asset. As she's one of the few characters in MKX, as we all know, that has the ability to Korean backdash. But even still, how I would want her to play would depend entirely upon how they would set that game up, as far as movement and as far as pace, as far as essential mechanics, whether those mechanics reward offense, reward defense, a mixture of both. It would all depend on the essential, and then of course also how well things are animated and how well things are actually flow well into how things are animated, to where a lot of how I could mold my play style on just essentially how they mold that game would take effect. So if they were to create a Mortal Kombat X-like flow for the next game, the way she played with Assassin or anything of that sort, where everything is, all of her tools are all her own and everything is essentially made to where it suits the bill on what she was able to do in the later stages of MKX's life, that would be nice. If it's more akin to, and then of course if it's more akin to MK9, like a souped up version of that, where if armor rules the day, well, then she'll have what she needs in order to, keep people away or keep people off of her. But in the flip side, as far as the balance of the game all told, and just speaking away from just, being around Katana, before I go ahead and do that, I would want her to essentially have her fans back. Let's make that clear. I want her to have her fan combos back. What they've done, taking those away from her over the course of MKX or MK11 and MK1, to say that I've not been a fan of that is putting it very mildly.
You're referring to like doing like aerial, like doing like an aerial fan and then being able to combo afterward. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh yeah, like ever since her inception in MK2, that's when one of the trademark iconic traits of her game plan. And that's another reason why Rule 1 of Don't Jump exists in the first place. And so, honestly, when it comes to them taking that out of her game plan in MK11 and MK1, I've not been a fan of that at all. And there's a lot of other reasons why I'm not a fan of those two games, but we can get into that later.
In the MK1, one of the, like, I believe it was the last patch that they added, you can do like an aerial fan and do like maybe like a couple of hits afterwards to like slightly extend the damage.
Yes.
So like you said, her damage in that game is very good. She has, for the most part, decent movement. She still has good normals. The problem is that she really has no offense. She lost her overhead. She has certain gaps in her strings. It's not really like an armor meta, but right when you play certain characters, that kind of comes across as a weakness. So I tried using her, but to me seemed very, very difficult because it's hard to break people down in a game that's not really zoning friendly. Again, she cannot really push the advantage. So what do you think about that character? And how long did you even play MK1 for? And if you could, why?
Now, MK1 is a very interesting story. I basically saw it in the same light that I see MK11, and that was a game that was, unfortunately, with its pace and with its shortcomings, it was set up to fail from before it even began, simply because a lot of lessons that seemed like they were learned before were forgotten when it came to putting those games together. And then as far as Katana was concerned, it seems like that ever since MKX, the character, as far as her gameplay has been concerned, has been on nothing but a backslide. A lot of her iconic capabilities, I already mentioned the fans and what the way that they changed that. I hate it. I want it to go back to the way it was. MK9, MKX, you get caught in the air with a fan, she knocks you in the air, hits you with a fan. That's what she does. That's how she gets the party started. And then on top of that, MK11, MK1. One thing, Dave, when you were using her, that you mentioned, of course, the gaps, and she's had unfortunate gaps in a lot of her stuff for the last 2 games that have been put out. And that's another thing that's been a very big hindrance to her game plan. Another thing that about that is the fact that she's had way too many dial-up strings, whereas a lot of the other characters, they don't require you to dial it in. They actually have a lot more freedom to play a lot more of a custom game than she does. And especially when it comes to MK11, one thing that killed me about that was the back 2 string that she had, where essentially if you hit somebody out of the air and you committed to all of that, or if they broke away or whatever the case may have been, she was at greater risk than the opponent, and that was one thing that I just thought was unacceptable. And then same thing, unfortunately, reared its head when it came to MK1, where she has a lot of dial-in strings where essentially not only are they dial-in, but they also have a lot of gaps in a lot of the sequences. So if you were on top of it with matchup knowledge, regardless of whatever cameos she may have had to try and cover her bases, you could blow her up simply because her kit was just not very well done at all. And her normals are a very unfortunate step down from what they were with their predecessors, MK9 and MKX. And as far as that goes, and a lot of her aesthetic essentially being toned the way that it has, it's just not been a very good, it's just not been a very last couple of titles for Katana fans. And MK11, at least they did her story and her promotion in the sense of her being used in the commercials and all that good stuff. And of course her story having the hero's journey that it's had in MK11, and then of course her main counterpart from the MK11, MKX, MK9 timeline being used in MK1 story as far as Titan of Time Katana, that was great. But in terms of her, of course, her story and all that, that's taken a backslide with how Liu Kang created the timeline, but that's getting into timeline shenanigans with the story. Sticking strictly to gameplay, the way that they've done her character the last couple of games has been unacceptable for me. I mean, the way that they've adjusted they've taken away the fan lift and turned it into what they've turned it into. The way they've turned a lot of her fan combos into what they have. I'm not a fan of it. Never have been a fan of it. And I honestly just want them to go back to what made Katana special during the MK9, MKX era. Well, when I say MKX, I mean Assassin and Royal Storm versions. I mean, I don't like the thought that they've, over the last couple of titles, they've stuck a lot of attributes inside of Katana's moveset that weren't completely hers. And another thing that harkens into that as far as MK1 is concerned, the arc kick. I mean, that's something that Sonya does. I mean, they gave her Sonya's arc kick in that game, and I was just thinking, guys, come on. Let her have her own moveset. She's her own character. She doesn't need to borrow it. If you want to put somebody else's moveset within the same character set, that's what Chameleon's for. I mean, seriously. I mean, let her have her own moveset. But other things, kept me away from MK1, which I only played, to answer that question, for about, I think, maybe 5 months, 6 months, and then got away from it. I knew from the moment that I touched the game during the course of the beta testing, and when they had the open beta, which was more or less an alpha version of the game being used, because all of us complained about the pace of the game not being great. And the moment I touched that version, I basically knew the game wasn't going to be, its longevity wasn't going to be the greatest. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of small lessons, they tried applying a lot of small lessons they learned from MK11 and its unfortunately disastrous gameplay into MK1, and they tried building off of that, using that as a launch pad, but unfortunately it was not exactly the best way to go ahead and do so, because everybody still thinks in a lot of ways the game is still very slow. I mean, everybody still wants to talk about neutral. Here's the thing. just being able to walk back and forth and do slow jockeying for position. That's not just what comprises neutral. Neutral is being able to apply how the game was built in order to actually create a whole entire scenario upon which you actually try to generate an opening for yourself or put yourself in a position to do more good than harm for your best interest. That's the best way I can define it. And ultimately, everybody seems to have this unfortunate misconception when it comes to the subject of neutral, that you need to emulate whatever Street Fighter's doing. And that's the worst way that you can apply that. And that's another thing that you could tell that they use to try and apply the semblance of the platform upon which they built the last two Mortal Kombat games around. That and trying to go ahead and build around what they were trying to do with Injustice, which is a completely different system than Mortal Kombat X or Mortal Kombat in general, in the sense of back the block, down the block, not needing a lot of the block button, and going around proximity block, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I over the years of my fighting game career, like dating back to when I was 9 years old, and even before, if you count MK versus DC, the definition of footsies, I think, isn't like a flat definition answer. Like, I think there's more context to it, and it varies from game to game. Like, footsies and MKX isn't the same footsies as like Street Fighter, and this is something me and Dave have like talked about, and like because there's like a philosophy for some people behind like the definition of footsies, but I think it really just boils down to like every game has their own footsies. Like MKX, you can say is like a mindless fest of 50-50s, but there is neutral and footsies, and it's messed up and very aggressive, but yeah, I think it's very dependent on the game, because then you talk about MK11 footsies, and unless you're Fujin, you really kind of have to just play like a slow paced game most of the time, where Fujin breaks the rules with Skywalker and that move where he walks in the air and stuff like that, and he has like a damn near full screen normal. So yeah, I think that is like one of the interesting talking points, like FGC like related, is just like the definition of neutral. I think a lot of people do. I agree with you. A lot of people misconstrued it with like they always have Street Fighter as like the center point of the definition of footsies, which I think is also wrong, like you said.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a misconstruction. I think whatever helps them win, they define as footsies. Whenever they lose to something, then it's not footsies. I think that's really. But I do agree with you. There's a like there's a characterization of this is what Street Fighter does, then that's what MK should do. But again, like the way you play footies in Marvel is completely different than in Street Fighter, and Street Fighter is completely different than Mortal Kombat X, and you know, MK9's. These games are all different. Footsie, honestly, that term has lost its meaning, uh, because speaking of Street Fighter, right? If a Honda player is doing a charge at you, headbutt, or even the butt slam, is that footsies? Like he's literally like like what is it, like a 300 something pounder is like doing stuff that doesn't make any sense, right? Yet it's so that term has just been overused. The same thing when they accused players like me of using too much zoning of armor. It's not footsies. Well, it's not footsies to you, but it's footsies to me. So I really believe that that term has lost its meaning, and I think NRS has fallen into the trap of trying to be a little bit more like too much like Street Fighter, especially with Mortal Kombat 11. There's no question about that. But even with a little bit of Mortal Kombat 1, but not to that extent, right? Because it's an assist-based game. So that's like one thing I would caution NRS. Like, don't try to be like whatever Street Fighter 6 or whatever Street Fighter, whatever Street Fighter 6 is or whatever Street Fighter 5 was. Just like follow your own intuition and what feels right for its player base.
Yeah, I
It's
think.
amazing that you bring that up. Go ahead, Franco.
Oh no, I was about to say. I think what identifies MK's gameplay, like like I think faster pace, like nonsense, like rush down mostly, with some other archetypes obviously, but like definitely fast paced gameplay and like fluid strings and normals, not these like slower, clunkier like strings. Like I think just faster paced gameplay and sometimes obnoxious, like best. It fits the MK franchise in my opinion in terms of gameplay. But what were you about to say?
Well, let me ask you. I'll let you comment. Let me just kind of put this in as a question as well.
Sure.
Because talking to you is like to me very fascinating because you seem to base everything about katana, whereas I feel like I'm so not used to that. Like I kind of like Tom Brady does that with Sub Zero, but like when I talk about fighting games, to me it's not about Freddy or about Zod or about Tremor. I kind of look at it as um, how do I take advantage of what's in the game to fit, what I'm good at. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't necessarily think, oh, I need this character to play the game the way I want to play. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you feel like you see
Oh, of
things
course.
like that? Because I feel like
No,
kind of Franco and I see it a little bit differently.
Now, the only reason why I say, just from the standpoint of a katana player from at certain points, is just to go ahead and put it in context as far as how to just give you a little insight on my perspective. Like, say
Absolutely.
for
It's not like
example,
I mean, oh, why are you talking about the character you're good with? No, I'm sorry, it's not meant to
oh,
be like that. No,
oh no, no, I didn't
you
take it
use
that way.
yeah.
I didn't take it
Of
that
course,
way.
you
No, no,
use
no, no.
katana. You're not going to talk about Boraicho, right? But just like it's kind of fascinating how like you're more about the character loyalist rather than I guess with King Junai, you're more like a archetype loyalist, right? Like if I find something
Oh
that's
yeah.
good for my gameplay style, I'll play like that. And Franco obviously has his.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, yeah, absolutely, and that's where different mindsets, definitely have the opportunity to go ahead and pick each other's brain. I didn't take any offense to that or anything to that at all. I mean, honestly, I equate it the way that I do just to give you a little bit of the perspective on, like, say for example, MKX or MK9, both completely different games, same franchise, different games, and completely different modus operandi on how you get the job done with regards to from a neutral standpoint and just in general. Not and the combo systems, although similar, still very different, and still goes to show that you have to apply what you're given with those games, and this in order to best suit your purposes and best suit your best interests. And that's another thing, where I'm glad you're bringing up how neutral is a lost and fuzzy, all that's a lost nomenclature. Is really not something where it has as much weight to it as it once did. Because one of my favorite things I used to tell folks was play the current game that you're playing, whether it's MK9, Street Fighter, Virtual Fighter, Tekken, etc. Play that game for what it is, not for what you think it should be. That way, you're not only going to have more fun, but you're also going to see yourself level up. And that was one thing that helped me level up. In games like Mortal Kombat X, where at first, thanks to where things were at the time or in the early going, I was about to retire from the game way back in 2016, 10 years ago. And then almost 10 years ago after Mid-South Championships, and then after everything went down in that tournament, after the final update and everything was done the way that it was, and the method of playing the game, especially from the standpoint of where I was playing, it changed the way that it did. Next thing you know, I wound up finding myself competing in, winning, and doing what I'm doing with my career in the later stages of my career. Years after I said I was willing to retire, after I thought what I had done at that point was well enough on its own. And so one thing I'm glad you brought up, Dave, was Street Fighter, where Street Fighter, everybody, had the unfortunate misconception that Street Fighter was the benchmark of how you should model a game, especially as far as mid-range, neutral game, or essentially, the method of how you essentially get everything done from any kind of what anybody would think is a legitimate standpoint to be modeled. And that's not how it. Look at Street Fighter now. Look at Street Fighter 6 now. I mean, Street Fighter 6 essentially has as close to a Mortal Kombat X run as you're going to get.
Exactly. Yeah, I literally was just about to say that
With
because
Drive Rush.
yeah, and that was obviously the inclusion of the drivers was controversial in that in the Street Fighter / Capcom community because they're like, what is this? This kind of seems like a semi Mortal Kombat X run, and that's exactly what it is. So that's what I mean. Like I think NRS should follow their intuition and design whatever footsies they would like instead of like trying to listen to certain people who are trying to convince them that Street Fighter, I don't know, I guess Super Turbo footsies, Third Strike footsies are the way to go. I don't think it is. I think they should just follow their intuition.
Well, yeah, and to build on that point right there, Dave. when you get right down to the thick of it, you have a few games now where NRS has now put out these games, and now it's gotten to a point where essentially you find yourself in the very interesting position to see just based on the data that you have on the games that have historically done well for you, the archetypes that have done well for you, and the archetypes that are not doing too well for you. In the sense of Mortal Kombat X and its peak, its pinnacle, its current condition, and essentially how it's progressed over the years. Yeah, story and absolutely no other Mortal Kombat game aside from maybe UMK3 can hold a candle to the longevity of MKX. MK11 been out now for about 7 years, and unfortunately, of course, when it comes to its longevity, not quite as good of longevity at all. I mean, had the players, you could argue, carried a lot more of the tournament scene than the gameplay, but ever since the game went away from being a main stage game, what you would say, Evo game or anything like that, you hardly even see any side tournaments for it, unless, of course, it's at the GOAT of all events, and that being Combo Breaker. And then, of course, you got MK1, which when you look at MK1, you see a game that is now out of the Evo running as far as being an Evo stage game in what should be its fourth year. And it's essentially seen a lot of its relevance fall to where it is because a lot of folks, myself included, weren't really in tune and weren't really too invested with the cameo system, along with, of course, the direction that the combat system in and of itself has gone overall. And a lot of this has taken a lot of its toll in the degree of the Mortal Kombat community, albeit still present, which is what we saw during the course of Combo Breaker weekend when we saw all of the titles that we did firmly represented. Unfortunately, when you take away an event like that and put it all out in the open to see how well everybody can carry the scene with what's currently the newest thing, it's not exactly in the greatest of space. And this is the area upon which NRS needs to pull and call their data in the sense of saying, okay, if we're going to make another Mortal Kombat game, what's working, what's not, what has lasted, what has not, what has been said about the games that we could improve, and what has been acted upon in the sense of what players said they wanted, they've maximized on, versus what they've said that they've wanted, we've given it to them, and they've not maximized on. NRS has a lot of data now upon which that they can apply, but at the same time it also comes down to execution. Everybody thought that Mortal Kombat 1 was going to be that game where essentially the MK community, or rather even go back further than that, everybody thought after MKX's success, especially with that final patch, that after everything was building towards MK11, we thought MK11 was going to burn all of the FGC to the ground and have everybody eating out of NRS's hands when it came to that January reveal back in January of 2019 in Los Angeles. I'll never forget that. In fact, I'm even looking at the hourglass token that it was dished out back at that time as a gift. We thought that game was going to be the next coming for NRS, and unfortunately, that did not come to fruition with how that game was built for a myriad of reasons, from breakaway to the way the game was constructed, to the lackluster combat system, to the crushing blows, fatal blows. Yeah, there was just way too much to list for one podcast. We'd have to do a whole nother episode if you guys will be up for it in order to go through all that.
Well, let me ask you, since you mentioned Evo, I want to ask you maybe the last two questions. Not so much Mortal Kombat. I think we have kind of hit up all the games more or less.
Sure.
So I don't know if you saw Evo and its registration numbers for all the games. Again, there's nothing to do with Mortal Kombat
Yes.
1 because you said Mortal Kombat 1 is not even there. But like all the
Yes.
numbers have been down. And
Yes.
Crimson Shadow from Test Your Mind, he kind of did like, hey, how many participants, there's a percentage has this game lost and so and so. Why do you think
Mhm.
the numbers are lower than usual?
There's a lot of reasons that go, and it goes
Like, give me
beyond just
like
the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, give me like your
But
top three. Why do you think? What do you think is going on? I'm sure there are a lot of reasons, but like, give me like your top three.
life. Well, that's one. And a lot of the scene has gotten older, and a lot of the scene has gotten to a point where a lot of, like, especially after the pandemic, we can't discount the pandemic and the impact that it's had. Because remember, things were trending in a huge way upward before COVID, and when things came back, it was nice, but things have not. And there were some records that were set post COVID, but by the same stretch of the imagination, COVID did stymie a lot of the scene's momentum, and then the scene has gotten older to the degree where a lot of folks have different priorities now. I mean, heck, I'm an example. It's gotten to a point where I've gotten so deep into my career that honestly, I mean, heck, I even hardly stream anymore, unfortunately. And something that I've been really wanting to rectify, simply because of the fact that I really want to go ahead and go ahead and set up a time for the Star Doc to come back to a degree, and for all of us to go ahead and conglomerate like we used to. Because I really want us to have that kind of fun again. And I definitely been meaning to see what I can do on that front, but unfortunately, life has interfered in ways that I've had to address that first before I can address anything else. Another thing is travel being, and this kind of ties into life already, but travel, unfortunately, being the bear that it is, especially with the current state of affairs with everything going on in this country. And in other countries, all told, where not just travel, but also others' ability to go and travel internationally the way that we could before, it's not what it once was. And on top of all of that, it might never be, simply because of the way things are with the tensions that are going on in the world with travel. Some folks from other countries are having a hard time getting visas, going to wherever it is they're going to go. And then also the travel prices right now, a lot of the prices with the way that they are now, I mean, that's a new reality that in a lot of places it's hard to keep up with that, and it's very hard for folks to make as much time and put out as much money to going to these events in order to go ahead and turn that into as much of a indulgence that we could before. And that's all the more reason why it was always imperative for everybody to say, hey, enjoy it while you've got it. We don't know how good these days are going to be while they last. And surely enough, those were always some heavy words that should have always been heeded when the chance was given. A third reason for all this, it comes down to the games. So a lot of the games might not be what they once were. I mean, there's a big saturation of fighting games, bigger than there ever has been in any given time in history, honestly. Ever since 2009, obviously, we already know the story with, of course, the Tekken 6, Street Fighter 4, setting the blaze, and then, of course, the spark that ignited the chain reaction where Mortal Kombat came back, Killer Instinct came back, and a bevy of other games came back better than ever. Soul Calibur came back, amongst others. It's even gotten Virtual Fighter. I mean, if you'd have told us 15 years ago that Virtual Fighter 6 was on the horizon and it was looking the way that it looks now, we'd have told you you're out of your mind. But here we are. That Sega was never going to invest in that franchise to the degree upon which that they have. And surely enough, they've gone and done it. And it looks amazing. That's a game I can definitely tell you that when it drops, I'm definitely going to try my hand at it the way that I did with Virtual Fighter 5. But there's a saturation of games right now, and then there's also some games have lived up to the hype. A lot of games have not, unfortunately. And I won't say names, but they know who they are. And I only hope they get better. I don't hope for them to fail. I hope they get better. And that, there's a turn of fortune in fighting games right now where things can get back on a good trajectory. But a combination of the first two factors, along with some of these games not being what a lot of folks remembered grinding, and a lot of what they remember investing in, that also plays a role. That's a factor where a lot of guys, let's say Guilty Gear, for example, a lot of the guys that main Guilty Gear XR, double X plus R, a lot of those guys really do not see themselves, didn't see themselves getting into XR or any one of the the revisions of Exard that exist, which I believe Rev Mark II is, I believe, where they stopped that. And then, of course, you've got Strive right now. A lot of the folks that played Exard don't gel with Strive. I mean, same, and the same will likely happen with whatever subsequent Mark in that series comes along. And the same thing goes with Tekken. I mean, I can tell you right now, a lot of the folks that I know that have played Tekken, that have grinded Tekken, have really been fighting every itch of their fiber of their being to not drop that game, unfortunately, even though I personally think it's a nice game. I thought Tekken 8 was a nice game for the
No,
time that I played it.
I like the game a lot. I think the um the Tekken community's reaction to the game to me is honestly, I'm just gonna say it is kind of deranged. Not so much, when changes were needed, but like they told you the game was gonna be more aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
and why are you surprised that it's aggressive? Why are you surprised? I wouldn't compare it to, MKX, like, but maybe there was a slight element, of when they had like power crushes, which essentially was armor, and then you could kind of convert it into some offense. Like, I don't understand. I feel like um they're mostly like Tekken 7 players who play Tekken for the first time, and that's their
Yeah.
definition of Tekken, which is fine. I like Tekken 7 as well. I played the game a lot, but however, like at some point, and I think you're the representation. Like, you don't like Katana MK11, then don't fucking play the game. Like, move on with your life. Like, just like, why are like, but these guys are like still like rioting and calling for Harada's job, which by the way, eventually whatever he quit. So
Yeah, of course.
it's just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. But honestly, this topic is for another time, for another, for another podcast, for another time. Let me ask you one last one, if you don't mind. Then Frank and I have
Sure.
to go. So what's next for you? You said you were not going to stream anymore. Like, what's next for you in terms of, are you, obviously you're kind of transitioning more of a mentor type role. Like, are you gonna like train new people? Are you gonna stream, the next Mortal Kombat or Injustice game, whatever it might be? Where do you stand?
No, I didn't say I wasn't going to stream anymore. So I was
Yeah.
thinking that I was going to definitely find myself getting into a point where I could go ahead and stream a little bit more in the upcoming months, where I can go ahead and put on some old streams where we can go ahead and play some of the games, where it be Mortal Kombat X, Mortal Kombat 9, etc., and then just go on from there. I mean, I have no issues doing that. And then, of course, doing some playthroughs on a lot of games that I haven't had the chance to play over the years, because of course, as we all know, time, if you want to stay competitive, you want to stay good in fighting games, you have to keep playing constantly, and that basically sometimes comes at the cost of playing and experiencing other games, and getting to a point where you find yourself building up a queue that you never fully realize. And so I'm trying to work some of that down, but at the same time, from time to time, some folks will come to me, asking for advice, not even just about Katana and any subsequent Mortal Kombat games or what have you, but also on playing Mortal Kombat or fighting games, all told. And I have no issues helping anybody out with that. If you come to me uh, with a legitimate will to learn on anything, and I'm in a position and I've got the time and availability to help you out, I have no issues doing that. I've coached players in the past, and to see what they've become out of that has been very awesome. And to see a lot of players that I've played, sparred with, and just spent as much time with over the years that I have, that blossom into what they've become, I mean, that's its own reward in and of itself. uh and to be honest with you, it's all going to depend on just essentially what happens, because as you already know, if I don't gel with a game, I'm just not going to play it long term, like I've not done with these last couple of titles. And then, of course, I'm very opinionated whenever people ask me about my opinion on how I see those games. And, I'm going to give a very truthful answer. I mean, it's going to be an answer that some folks want to hear, it's going to be an answer that some folks don't want to hear, but you're gonna hear it if you ask for it. So that's essentially how I see it. And I know there's a lot of folks that have there are arrangements where they have to go ahead and say, they can't really say, a lot of what I can say about certain games, developers, or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, that's also another reason where it's all the more reason for me seeing where a lot of those devs have gotten worse, or a lot of the ways that a lot of our favorite titles have gotten worse over time, rather than do the opposite on what we prefer. Well, that leaves it to guys like me to say something, or else, a lot of what you're seeing is what you're going to continue getting over time, because a lot of how everything gets put together these days, if it doesn't evolve for the better, well, then you're just going to continue to get used to a very lackluster product, and nobody wants to do that. And so, and when it comes to making things known and making a lot of and just making a lot of that feedback be known rather than holding in. That's another reason why back in the day when I ran the podcast, the Stardock Streamcast, I would always put all that out there so that anybody that may have had the same thoughts but couldn't really say it out loud, well, it's one of those, someone has to say it, and I love what I'm doing, so it might as well be me. Kinds of things, and I've always enjoyed, being in that position to go ahead and do that, especially since now, as mentioned earlier in the stream, rather early in the cast, I can now enjoy the very beautiful status of elder statesman. So that how older folks get when they get old, they say whatever's on their mind, they say whatever they want. And that's exactly how I see it. I've gotten to that point when I've been in the community long enough since the MK9 days, where I was out there way back when the game was getting debuted, and doing all of that, and I can say whatever I wish now. So, but at the same time, I just see it as being one of those things where when a lot of that feedback is taken into account and it's being used to build a better product, and a better product is what we get down the line, to where I can invest that kind of time like I used to. Like what Franco mentioned, when he was in middle school, was able to know life everything and get as awesome into games as he's been for years. And I still can't believe he's not in his 30s. You lucky.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm in a pretty lucky,
then I'll
but
invest in it.
also odd position, because like I feel like I have like an old head mentality when it comes to like what I want in fighting games, but I'm still only 24, so like a lot of modern fighting game players, I feel like on average just have lower patience and want everything to be rushed down and in your face 24/7. But I like my archetypes, I like my high power levels, So I feel like I'm in the oddball or minority when it comes to what I want to see in my games at my
The
age.
problem is when you ask fighting game players what they want, the problem is also you might get like 10 different answers. That's really, but that's another
Absolutely.
that's another topic for another podcast. Can you, Starcher, can you tell what people, if they want to, watch your stream, if they want to contact you on Twitter, if you're active, can you tell the people where they can find you, where they can watch you stream?
Absolutely. So you can find me on twitch.tv/StarCharger28. And also, I have a Discord channel. It's the Stardock Discord. And then if you were to want to be involved with that, you can go ahead and get in touch with me. I haven't been involved with Discord for quite some time, but now that I'm seeing myself starting to get the itch a little bit more when it comes to the games, I'm starting to think of starting to churn that up a little bit more now. The Stardock Streamcasts can all be seen on the YouTube channel as well, as far as the StarCharger28 YouTube channel. So if you want to go there, StarCharger28, you'll be able to find those fairly easily. And then there you'll also see all the past versions of the Stardock showcases, which is of course when I streamed all the live events, whether it be sets, tournaments, events, etc. Right on the inside of there, some of my old tournament runs are there as well, in case you wanted to check that out across a multitude of games. And then on Twitter, I can be found at StarCharger28 on the Twitters. And you'll see me very opinionated on there, because I don't hold back on anything, whether it be what's happening in the world, what's happening in the gaming community. I mean, trust me when I tell you a lot of how I'm keeping it on here, I won't keep it on there. I'm just letting you know. So as far as everything goes, you can find me on all of those mediums, and it'd be nice to go ahead and see some old friends. And that's another reason why I'll be getting a little bit more active now than I have been in the last couple of years. Because it feels good, as mentioned earlier, to definitely reignite everything with some old friends again. And like we because Burrito, yeah, you and I were teammates, of course, over there at BXA for the time that we were, and that was a prime time during the scene where honestly, seeing everybody around and being able to travel around, I would be crazy if I told you I didn't miss all that as greatly as I did. And those are some of the greatest years I can remember spending out on the road, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories of BXA was, I wish we could find the picture, man, but you know what picture I'm talking about already? Like, with Jackal in the hotel room, and he was asleep, but yeah, you caught him lacking, and he probably wasn't lacking. It was probably just bedtime, but that picture where you're smiling right next to him asleep. Oh my god, that's one of my favorite BXA memories for sure. That was so funny.
Classic.
I wish we could find that picture. I would put it up right now if I could.
I think I might have it in my old archives. You might have to give me a minute to look for it, but I think I might be able to hook you up.
Oh my god, yeah, that's.
I think maybe, I might be.
Maybe you can share, and that can be the thumbnail if it's appropriate. But guys, I'm gonna, as Franco knows, I like to go on sometimes on my late night runs or walks, so I'm gonna cut it here if that's okay with you guys.
Of course.
Obviously, I want to thank Franco for hosting it, but more importantly, we want to thank StarCharger for taking his hour and a half to spend time with us again, talk about Kitana, talk about all the NRS games, and to talk about what he's up to right now. So this was episode 26. Thank you guys so much for listening. We shall see you in the next episode of the Nexus podcast. Bye, everybody.
Later, everybody.